Well, it's a great pleasure to be here with three of you today. My name is Henry Shepard. I'm the Assistant Director of the Stevens Initiative, and I'm really pleased to be joined by my colleagues from Stevens Initiative programs who've been conducting virtual exchange activities over the past few months or few years. This is a continuation of a conversation we started at a conference in Chicago late last month. And we're really excited to have a few more minutes to talk about some of the themes that we raised during that conversation. So what I'd like to do is start off by having each of you introduce yourselves and say just a few words about the project that you've been involved in and the role that you've been playing in it. So I'm looking in the upper left-hand corner for me, and that would start with Mike. So Mike, do you want to introduce yourself and your project?
Great, thank you, Henry. Yes, my name is Mike Kimball. I am an anthropologist at the University of Northern Colorado. I've been involved in the CELIA Connect program as a partner of CELIA for about 13 years. And my project is focused on virtual exchange through the CELIA Connect program as an embedded component of an interdisciplinary course that I teach.
Thanks, and I look forward to getting into a lot more detail soon. Rhianna, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your program?
Sure. My name is Rianna Rogers, and I teach at SUNY Empire State College as well as a visiting professor at the American University of Technology in Kaslik, Lebanon. And I'm actually teaching in the Stevens Initiative on the side of MENA for the American University of Technology back to the United States. And so I am working with SUNY Old Westbury, Empire State College, as well as two institutions in Lebanon.
Thank you. And Lisa, tell us about your program.
My name is Lisa Roberts. I'm working with the Chicago Sister Cities International on a project called the STEAMuseum, a virtual museum, STEAM being science, technology, engineering, art, and in our case, museums. And our project connects high school students in Chicago and Casablanca, which are sister cities, working together over the course of an entire academic year to create digital exhibits around STEAM subjects. So that's what I'm working on. New program, we're in our second year only.
Thank you all very much for explaining and keeping it brief. So I want to start off with sort of a broad question, which is, why do you think being globally competent or culturally sensitive is important for young people today? And if you think it's important, why do you think virtual exchange is a good means of helping young people build these understandings and skills? And I start with you, Rhianna, if you could.
I think really in this time that we're in of cultural unrest, it's important to think of ways to combat cross-cultural misunderstandings. In my background as both an anthropologist and a cultural historian, I'm regularly tasked with my two hats of working in different countries to make sure that my students can collaborate together in effective ways and not propagate misunderstandings so that they don't really learn and engage with each other. And this is really important for building this kind of culturally sensitive cross-cultural awareness, because if you don't have that safe space to be able to engage in these types of dialogues, then really no learning can happen, and you can't really progress past that kind of introduction. So I think it's really critical, not only in that piece, but I have students that are from a variety of age ranges as well. So they're young and old, and they're all coming together with all these different myths and stereotypes about what it means to be a student. And these can exist within our country and outside of our country, but giving that space to really kind of break these down, reflect on where students are, and giving them that opportunity to say, this is where I am, this is who I am, and somebody else saying, I respect that, let's kind of start this dialogue together. It's actually really exciting and a fun opportunity for them.
Lisa, would you like to share where your program's coming from?
Yes, I would echo everything that Rhianna said. I think my audience is largely high school students, and they hear about and experience the fact that we are living in a global world. That's the language everybody uses now, and as far as what that means for them, I think it operates at a couple of different levels. One being that what they hear on the news, in their encounters living in both of our cities, and certainly Chicago, very diverse cities, to understand what that means, the people that they're hearing about, the countries that they're hearing about, the current events that they're hearing about. Virtual exchange gives them a different kind of context for taking those in, but I also think many of them have in mind what's going to happen next. Am I going to college? Am I getting a job? And the fact is that the world of work is a very global world now, and so to be able to think about that in the context of both the virtual sense, which is a way in which a lot of work is being done now, but also the kinds of teams that exist across borders, is one that you just can't introduce kids to too early. So that's something else that we're trying to get out of this.
Thank you. Mike, you used to teach in Maine when you started with the SUNY program, and now you're in Colorado. What about this program has seemed valuable to you for the students that you've had in those places?
Well, our student population is diverse, and that means it includes what some people would call non-traditional students, and also first-generation college students, students from diverse backgrounds that are underrepresented in a lot of higher education situations and so forth. So we have a growing diversity in our population in both places. In Maine, it was mostly first-generation students, I would say, and these are young people who, frankly, on their radar screen, you will not find study abroad. That's not something that they even considered as being an option, very few of them anyway, and they came to the university because they knew that a college education would be better for them in the future, so they can get jobs and things like that. So, you know, the opportunity to do, you know, a virtual study abroad experience is extraordinary for them, and on a couple of levels, right? Because on one level, it's they may never travel beyond the boundaries of their state, and this is the case that in Colorado as well. I'm not meaning to suggest that our entire student population is like that, but there's enough students here where you know, they're coming from. I had one student, for instance, who became a very active CELIA Connect program participant to the point where she got facilitator training. She grew up in Colorado and had never even seen the ocean, never mind another country. And so this creates a venue for them to be in a place where they're comfortable, but at the same time push their comfort zone by interacting with people from very different cultural backgrounds and different life experience. So, you know, on that level, I think it's really key to create these kinds of opportunities, and the CELIA Connect program has been there to do that for both Maine and for Colorado. On another level, I think, or to develop further just the point I was making, I think no matter what walk of life, background, whatever, students are coming from, nowadays especially, there's a growing resistance to getting out of your comfort zone. There's a lot of echo chambers going on in social media. There's a lot of fear. And so when you're creating an environment in which students are challenged to reach into their cultural discomfort zones and develop skills for communicating across those boundaries, you're changing their lives.
Lisa, maybe it's in the name of your program, but I'd like you to say a little bit more about what's distinctive about the STEAM Museum. What makes the STEAM Museum a unique virtual exchange experience?
In part, it's the project itself. This is creating a virtual museum. When we conceived of the STEAM Museum, one of the reasons that it was appealing is that STEAM subjects are ones that are important ones to master by way of attacking some of the many problems that we're facing in the world today. And they are subjects that cross cultures in many ways. Science, art, and so on are ones that have an existence and an expression in every culture that we would be dealing with. And so it was an access point, but something that was outside of kind of the usual cultural exchange topics. We wanted something that was neutral. We wanted something that was serious, that was not just another school assignment for kids, and something that we could organize work around. So we wanted the students to have a real-world experience of working with a small team and all of the kind of communications and negotiation skills that go with that, but around a topic that wasn't too scary. These are high school students, and that could be creative, and that ultimately was in the service of a new kind of digital space, which we wanted their help in creating. Kids love that kind of stuff. Kids are all about social media, but we didn't want just another social media space. We wanted something that could be a kind of information resource created by and for them.
Rianna, I know your courses are part of a larger community of these SUNY COIL courses, or Collaborative Online International Learning courses. What has that meant for you, and what do you think is distinctive about that model and about your courses in particular?
Well, I've mentioned this before. I've been doing a lot of virtual exchange long before I joined COIL, and many of my courses involve a lot of students from a lot of countries. I've had students that are from the Dominican Republic, Turkey, Lebanon, Cyprus, and the United States. And I've been doing that for quite some time. But one of the things that I've noticed about joining this initiative is there is a more formalized structure in joining a community that you don't really see when I was doing this on my own. And I can tell you that having a community of support in order to develop the things that I've been developing, you can start to work in a vacuum. And working in a vacuum can be okay. I mean, you can learn things and you can learn from yourself, but it gets even better when you can engage with others. And I think something else that's come up, which has been really interesting, and I brought this up to you before about OERs, because I use a lot of those. In my course right now, we just utilized an OER that was talking about cultural diversity. And what was really fascinating is the students, all of them are talking right now in my exchange, and they brought up this thing about the golden rule versus the platinum rule, which I think this is great. As we all know, the golden rule is do unto others as you have them do unto you. But they talked about the platinum rule that was brought up in this OER, which is do unto others as they would have you do unto them. So that your focus is not on you, that your focus is on learning about them. And this has triggered such an engaging conversation. People have been going on and on and on about taking this, universally known statement and then flipping it and being like, wow, I actually can think about somebody in this different, unique way. And it's actually speaking to everyone in the course, no matter their background. So, I mean, that's been something that's been super interesting with all this stuff coming together. It's been very unique.
That's really interesting. And that's something that's come up since we had our conversation at the panel, it seems. So thank you very much for sharing that.
I'm going to use that.
Yep.
Mike, what's from your understanding of other programs, or just from what you've seen from the Connect program, what has stuck with you as something that's sort of a unique contribution of the Connect program for your students?
Well, I would echo what Rianna was saying about that community approach. I understand now that, I could be going off on my own and doing this kind of thing, and I applaud Rianna for the incredible innovation and energy that she's put into creating all kinds of things, and I'm just beginning to learn about the diversity of them and how amazing they are. But, for the rest of us who are not as innovative, I guess, having CELIA come along and offer a platform that is I guess you could call it a community building platform in addition to communication, has been a great help. And it's allowed me to build learning communities in my classroom and create sort of cross-fertilization. So, the students then, they go on and they become part of a moderated or a facilitated session with a small group of their counterparts around the world, focused on Middle Eastern countries, but including members from European countries and North American countries. And you know, in that experience, they build a sense of community in that small group session. Then they leave those sessions and they come to my class. And in my class, we have another community that we're forming. It's a small, small class size, and we all get to know each other, and everybody is respected for the experience, the life experience, and perspectives that they're bringing to the table. And they get to share whatever they want to from their CELIA Connect program experience. And so you end up getting, as I say, this cross-fertilization happening where one community informs and enriches the next community, and it goes back and forth from there.
Thank you all very much for explaining those in more detail. I would love to get a little bit of a sense about what you all heard at the conference that we attended together, and this is occurring to me now as something that I don't really, I'm not sure I know what your takeaways were, aside from it was a productive and interesting time. So let's just take a moment, and I'd love to hear whoever has thoughts to start off by just saying what you heard from each other on the panel that you presented, and also what you might have heard from attending over those 2 days, what you learned about what other people are doing, or new questions or challenges or things that you want to bring back to what you're thinking about. And I should say, I should have mentioned it sooner, that we were in Chicago at the DePaul University SUNY COIL conference, the Global Learning Conference, and we were really pleased with the great event that they put on, and really glad to be following it up with this. So does anyone have anything that they'd like to put on the table of what they heard and what they brought home?
I came away with many takeaways, but one in particular that I'm still thinking about has to do with the way in which these virtual exchange projects, and we all heard about so many different kinds of projects, different kinds of audiences, different kinds of purposes, and all of them both had integrity in and of themselves and experiences in and of themselves for the participants that were valuable, but they also all modeled something larger than themselves about how we need to interact with one another in the world. And I thought about that with my students as it relates to what I was saying earlier about the world of work, and how this working with one another in larger communities, in small communities, in teams, those are genuine experiences as they are being undertaken in the context of virtual exchange, but they're also practice for other kinds of encounters that will happen in the future in work contexts, in media contexts, in all sorts of encounters where we will have to confront the other and communicate with the other and negotiate with the other. And so that is a thread that I found running through much of what I heard, as different as all of those projects were.
I think for me, what I found so interesting was many people are engaging in this, kind of like how I originally engaged in this, because of their passion for students. That was probably the biggest thing that I saw. People are willing to do things because they genuinely care about building bonds across cultural, religious, and social and socioeconomic lines, which I thought was great. I think one of the biggest things that I noticed that kept sticking with me is, how do we find ways to make these more visible so that others can either adopt, use, or modify these great projects that exist in other ways and in other environments? Because what I see is we have great work, but it's very disjointed at the moment. We have no universal space that kind of pulls us all together. And I've received a lot of emails from various people who came to our panel, since our panel, asking for resources to use in other countries. Like, they've been asking, a lot of them, saying, you said you have this list of resources at such and such of institution. We're doing this initiative to create a list of resources. And I wrote back to them, I said, I think that would be great, but maybe if you could share those after you're done, and that we could all come together and create a universal space so that we're not either redoing work over and over again, or that we're not continuing to create little silos, which is not going to be helpful moving forward.
For sure.
Yeah, I think it's, my perspective is, I agree with all of that, and I think those are important insights. I, had a very brief period of time at the Chicago conference. I had other scheduling things happening, and so I basically parachuted in and then took off as soon as the conference was over. So I missed out on this opportunity for a lot of communication across these different projects and so forth. Nevertheless, in the short time I was there, what I was really struck by was, again, like Rianna was just saying, the energy that people are bringing to the project of doing these kinds of exchange experiences, and I really liked Lisa's insight into this, that it goes beyond the individual projects into something, a larger question about how we all should be and could be communicating with each other and building these bridges of understanding. That I really got that loud and clear, even the short time that I was there. But I also felt that for me, I've been a professor who's been doing the Connect program for, more than a decade, but I never really connected up with other people who are doing similar things. And I felt alone in the universe in terms of this idea of virtual exchange. I really, I was amazed at what Celia was doing. I loved being connected, and I loved the connections that I was able to foster as a result of that participation, but I had really no idea. I was very naive about what's really going on out there, and I started thinking, why aren't we doing this more here at my university and probably at lots of other universities? Why is this not a thing that everybody? Because to tell you the truth, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this, that my institution, one of the things that it's targeted as a core strategic direction is what they call internationalization, right? And that has all these different definitions, and some of them are, more difficult to understand than others. But the fact remains that this should be a core piece of that, and I think that it can be a core piece of it. So conferences like that just raise awareness around what the potential is for that kind of pursuit.
Thank you for all. Those are all very, I think, really valuable insights to have walked away with, and I hope that you'll all become, champions for those observations. Rianna, we at the Stevens Initiative are working on some sort of database of resources, but of course we're not the only ones, and we don't want them to all exist in isolation. So thinking more about how we can actually bring these resources together and spread the word about them is going to be a really big challenge that we'll need a lot of help in doing it right. So I'd like to actually kind of jump off of what Mike was saying a little bit and ask you all for your advice, not just about what advice you would give to other educators who want to get involved in virtual exchange. That is very important, but I think it seems like each of you has some observations about what you would like to see in the field, what you would like to have happen, the powers that be. What do you want either to be done on a system level or done from some entity? What do you think needs to happen in order for this to put down deeper roots and spread more broadly? And maybe sounds like Rianna is ready to start.
I think there's, just like any innovative area, we need to create spaces of notoriety for individuals who are taking part in this type of work in different vectors of society, whether it be in academia, whether it be in the professional workspace. This type of work isn't being credited towards a job, and in many cases. And I think that that's important for people to keep in mind. We need to be celebrating these types of innovations publicly, whether it be, I'm not even saying financially, I'm saying there should be something about, more interviews like this, more, discussions where we're actually showcasing, these innovative and exciting ideas and opportunities for people to learn. And I think kind of piggybacking on that too is I think there has to be a level of humility in this and willingness to make mistakes, admit our mistakes, learn from our mistakes, and join this community of thinking together. If we can do that and we can continue to kind of formulate a joint community that is willing to learn, fall, go up and down, I think it'll make it a much more inviting, and this goes back to like this concept of safe space for everyone. You know, you have innovators, and I can tell you this as an academic, junior faculty could be afraid of taking part in some of these things because they might not get credited towards tenure, right? But if we create a safe space and say, like, you know what, we're excited, we're going to celebrate what you're doing, no matter what level you are in your career and what career you're in, we want you to do this. Coming all the way from the top at the Department of Education and all the way down at the institutional level. I think that would be awesome.
I would add to that that the issue of crediting relates to the participants as well, not just the participant leaders, but in the case of the students, for example, looking at the public education system, which is what I am so immersed in, making virtual exchange, integrating virtual exchange into the course of sort of normal educational activity, that this is a valid way of learning, and integrating it into the way that we teach in our schools, as opposed to being a kind of add-on. And I think with a lot of technology-based programs, it still is kind of an add-on, because schools aren't very good at, schools have a very set way that they do things, which is modeled on kind of their old industrial roots. Mm-hmm. And it's really hard for school systems to change. And there are a lot of reasons for that have to do with, you know, mandates and you know, testing and all sorts of requirements that govern what happens inside of a classroom and doesn't give teachers enough freedom to be really creative. And so I think working at a systemic level, as you were sort of insinuating at the beginning with your question, Henry, is incredibly important, so that this becomes integrated into the course of ordinary teaching and learning in whatever setting, university settings as well.
Yeah, I feel like I can synthesize what Rhianna and Lisa were saying into a sort of a strategic planning point of view, because, you know, those of us who are at universities that are not fully invested in this kind of thing, for which, you know, there are little pockets of it happening but no sense of cohesiveness around it, need to, as Lisa was saying, not see it as an add-on, but see it as integral, really, to the mission of the university itself. And part of the way of doing that is to approach it as Rhianna was talking about, where we are recognizing the work that everybody's doing, and at all levels. And so I come from a background of doing community engagement strategic planning. So for our university, we now have a university-wide community engagement plan, which is integrated into all aspects of the operation of the university. We have a lot of, you know, a long way to go, but we start to see its relevance in all these, everywhere from, you know, the academic program itself to even facilities, how the physical plant of the university is understood and connected to everything else that goes on, and certainly the surrounding communities that are a part of why we're here are integrated through that kind of process. So I feel that the virtual exchange, as we see it manifested in the three ways that we're talking about today, and in the, you know, the myriad others, are to be understood as a way of furthering the mission that a university has for doing that kind of engagement. It's a form of community engagement. It's a form of internationalization. It's just a natural component to see emerge in today's world. How many times do we hear from administrators that, well, can you do that online? You know, and to actually say, well, not only can we do this online, but we can do it better than lots of other people are doing things online, because we have this connection to the virtual exchange experience.
Mm-hmm. So as a means of wrapping up the conversation, I'd love to hear just a few words from each of you about advice you would give to someone in a position similar to your own who is thinking about getting involved in virtual exchange. Rhianna, what would your advice be to a professor interested in trying it out?
I would say reaching out to joining a community, whether it be any of the communities that we've described in this conversation, you know, COIL or Stevens Initiative, or finding people that are like-minded at your institutions or places of work who genuinely care about establishing globalized competencies and cultural sensitivities towards others. Because if you do this alone, I'm going to tell you from my own experience, it's going to be a lot harder than it would for you to do it with others.
Thank you. Lisa?
I guess I would say don't be afraid. I think that technology is one of those things that divides people to some degree along generational lines, perhaps present company excluded. But, you know, it is something that is growing and evolving so quickly. It's really hard to keep up with the platforms, the options, the machinery, and I think that it can feel daunting, especially if you're new to the world. What does that involve? Is it expensive? What do I have to learn? What's my skill set? What if it doesn't work? And in the end, you do what Rianna said. You join a community, you ask questions, you inform yourself as best you can, and if it doesn't work once, you try it the next time. It's not a big deal. But I think it's something that's really easy for people to be kind of put off by if it's not part of their normal universe of teaching and tools and so on.
I think that we've covered the bases with that response. I would just say feel free to start small. This isn't a go big or go home situation. Start where you're comfortable and grow. Let it be organic. Grow it from there.
Wow. Those three pieces of advice are clear and I think fit together very well. Join a community, don't be afraid, and start small. And I think that really jives with what we are hearing here at the Stevens Initiative too. We could go, you know, in so many other directions and learn a lot more about your programs, and maybe you all will come up with more ways to continue sharing, whether by video with each other or on your own or in writing, and I would welcome you all to do that. But for now, I think we should wrap the conversation there, and maybe we'll find out more about what the community response is once we share this video, and hopefully people who are watching it will leave comments or reach out to me here at the Stevens Initiative, and our information is all up on our website, or maybe even reach out to you and pick your brains more about what you've been doing and how they might learn from that. Thank you so much for joining the panel originally, and thank you so much for suggesting this follow-up conversation and for taking the time to do it. So we'll sign out for now and look forward to the next chance to talk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Henry, and thank you, Rianna and Lisa. It was a pleasure having this conversation.
Well, let's do it again.
Okay.
I agree.